You're listening to Mr. Thursday Night. Now here's Brett Gombita.
Well, hello, and thank you to Ethan Spazarski for that intro. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It's been a while. It's been 217 days, which is the equivalent to 31 weeks since our last Thursday night football game. But that all changes tonight. We've got the Hall of Fame game at Tom Benson Stadium in Canton, Ohio, between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Detroit Lions. My name's Brett Gombita. Welcome to Mr. Thursday Night 2025 edition. And looking at how I've fared in the past, in 2021, I went 13-3, including an 8-0 start. Didn't run the show in 22 or 23. Came back in 2024 with the preseason, went 5-1, and then 11-8 in the regular season, including a 3-game win streak to end it off. I'm going to have more games to pick from this year because there's a Christmas Week 17 triple header to close out the year, which means that there's 21 regular season games as opposed to the usual 19 on Thursday. So more games for me. It's going to be a fun year. Hope you guys are ready to be here for the ride because I know I'm ready. I'm buckled up. And we're going to start off here by looking at last year's Hall of Fame game. It was Bears 21, Texans 17. The game got called early due to weather conditions. And that's not the first time that's happened. This happened in 1980 as well, in a game that the Los Angeles Chargers were in. But the Chargers must bring the precipitation because there's an 85% chance of rain tonight in Canton. We might get another early ending game. Not only did it happen in 1980, it also happened in 2003, so don't be surprised if this game tonight gets called short. Of course, this is the Hall of Fame game, and it can't be a Hall of Fame game without a player going into the Hall of Fame that played on one of these teams. We've got Antonio Gates getting inducted, former member of the Chargers. The most touchdowns by a tight end in NFL history. And usually the other team has a Hall of Famer too, but the Lions don't have anyone going into the Hall of Fame this year. However, Antonio Gates is from Detroit, so I think that's where they're getting the Lions from in this situation. Usually it's a Hall of Famer from both sides. Speaking of both sides, let's talk about some players in this matchup who have played for both teams. Kyle Van Noy is one that I forgot about that played for both sides. He was a Lion for 3 years, 2014 through 2016, and then a Charger in 2022. He actually started his career in Detroit before winning a couple Super Bowls in New England. Now he's a key piece of that Ravens defense. Going to be talking about him probably later on in the year. We've got a couple Ravens Thursday night games. Another one is Dwight Freeney, who was a 2-year Charger. That was his first stop after leaving the Colts after a decade there, and then the Lions were his last team. His career ended in 2017 after a quick stop in Detroit. And then how about some love for a kicker? Michael Badgley was a Charger for 3 years and a Lion for 2 years. You can't say he was the right hand man because he was a kicker. He was the right foot man for Justin Herbert and Jared Goff there for a couple years each. So we talked about some guys that played for both sides in this matchup. How about some guys with some local ties to me here in Western Pennsylvania? Najee Harris, former Steeler. First year for Najee here on the Chargers. We've got Jaquay Jackson, who played high school football at Sarah Catholic in the Pittsburgh area, and also played his college ball at Cal U before going to Rutgers. So that's a pretty cool connection there, a D2 guy, a Whippeal product. Just something cool to see for the fellow Western Pennsylvanians that are tuned in. Dez Fitzpatrick of the Chargers, wide receiver. He was a Steeler for a little bit, a couple preseasons there. You got Bud Dupree, a former first-round pick of the Steelers in 2015, played with the Steelers through 2020. Dupree had a few good years as a pass rusher alongside T.J. Watt, and he also intercepted Justin Fields in a game last year in the Steelers' home opener. You got another Steeler on this team, Dante Jackson, after 1 year in the Burgh, is headed to L.A., and then a Pitt alum, Branson Taylor, offensive lineman, who just got drafted this year. Talk more about him when we get to the Chargers rookie class. On the Lions side of the ball, Kyle Allen, former Steelers quarterback of last year, and then a couple Pitt guys. You got Eric Hallett and Avonte Maddox, a couple of the guys that are in the secondary that played college ball for the Pitt Panthers. So who are we seeing in this game for the first time? Well, we're not going to see Tyleik Williams or Tate Ratledge for the Lions because both of them are out tonight. Top 2 picks of the Lions are both listed as out, which leaves Isaac Tesla as the highest picked Lion that we'll see tonight. He's a big body receiver out of Arkansas. And the Lions really don't have a receiver that can go up and get it like that. They've got Jameson Williams, they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. They just don't really have a receiver that can go up there and get 50-50 balls. I know Amon-Ra and Jameson, they're blazing fast, got speed, but they don't have that physicality quite like Isaac Tesla. I'll be interested to see what he brings to the table here tonight. Also in the Lions draft class, you had Miles Frazier, offensive lineman out of LSU, defensive lineman Ahmed Hassanin, and safety Dan Jackson out of Georgia. 4 of the 6 picks were focused on the offensive and defensive line. That tells me, Detroit has their playmakers. They want to beef up those lines now to stay competitive. And the Lions in free agency, they improved their defensive back room. They signed DJ Reed and Avonte Maddox, a couple of veterans. They did lose Carlton Davis to free agency, a former defensive back of the Lions, but they're replacing experience with experience, and secondary might be the way to go when building a powerhouse team. Look at what the Eagles did last season with one of the best secondaries in the league. I think other teams will start prioritizing those positions more when building a powerhouse team. They also went out and got Kyle Allen, who we will see tonight. We'll talk more about him when we get to the quarterback matchup. But really what this offseason was about for the Detroit Lions was re-signing some key veterans and some depth pieces. Dan Skipper, Derek Barnes, Marcus Davenport all re-signed this offseason. But 2 people who won't be coming back, probably the 2 biggest losses that the Lions had this offseason. Both coordinators, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, have moved on to bigger and better. Johnson is going on to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears to work alongside Caleb Williams. Johnson is going to get replaced by John Morton, who has almost 3 decades of coaching experience, mostly working as a passing game coordinator and a wide receivers coach, has been at places such as University of Southern California, the 49ers, the Saints, the Jets, the Raiders. Most recently last year was the Broncos passing game coordinator, working with rookie QB Bo Nix, who had a successful rookie year. And John Morton is actually returning to Detroit. He had the title of Senior Offensive Assistant for the Lions in 2022. So Dan Campbell going out and getting one of his former coaches to fill the void for the Ben Johnson departure. And then Aaron Glenn moved on to be the Jets head coach. He's getting replaced by Kelvin Shepard, who is an 8-year veteran in the NFL and has 5 years of coaching experience, 3 as Detroit's linebackers coach. When I think of coordinators leaving and going elsewhere, it makes me think of the San Francisco 49ers, because how many times has that happened in San Fran where a coordinator has gone on to take a head coaching job? And look how the 49ers ended up. They ended up fine. They've been able to find guys to replace Mike McDaniel, Robert Saleh, DeMeco Ryans, and they've been just fine, and I think we could see the same from Detroit. Although I don't think it'll be instant. I think it'll take a couple weeks for these new coordinators to get up to speed, per se. That's enough about the Lions. Let's get to some Chargers talk. Talking about the rookies, Amari Hampton has the chance to be the lead back after the mishap with Najee Harris and the fireworks. Hampton's a rookie out of UNC, and Jim Harbaugh did say that no traditional starters will play in tonight's game. I don't think Amari Hampton's a traditional starter because he hasn't played down in the NFL, so I'm expecting to see him tonight, even though Dan Campbell is resting his top 2 picks. The Chargers' second pick in the draft was Trey Harris, out of Ole Miss, wide receiver. Another young gun for Herbert. Most likely, Harris going to be the number 2 behind McConkey. Josh Palmer did leave in free agency. Quentin Johnston's still there as well, but he'll probably have to slide down the depth chart to number 3. And then Jamari Caldwell, defensive lineman out of Oregon. He's great at stuffing the run, and come the regular season, probably going to be the team's number 2 defensive tackle. Those are your top 3 picks for the Chargers in the draft. They also had Kyle Kennard, a defensive end out of South Carolina, Keandre Lambert-Smith out of Auburn, and former Penn State receiver. They had Oronde Gadsden II, a tight end out of Syracuse, Branson Taylor out of Pitt, as we mentioned earlier, safety R.J. Mickens from Clemson, and then safety Triquez Bridges from Florida. Really what this draft meant for L.A. was surrounding Herbert with new weapons after losing J.K. Dobbins and Josh Palmer in free agency, as they drafted 2 wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back in the first round. So bolstering up those weapons for Herbert seemed to be their biggest thing that they wanted to accomplish in this offseason. They also got Tyler Conklin in free agency, another tight end for Herbert, and one with sure hands, because Will Dissly dropped some passes late last season, had some people enraged. One of those passes actually turned into an interception in the wild card game. Conklin didn't have any drops last year, so you do the math there. They also signed a Super Bowl champion from last year. Mekhi Becton is coming to the Chargers. Building up the interior offensive line is something the Chargers want to do because they've struggled in that area in years past. So Mekhi Becton should slide right in, no problem. Added Najee Harris as well. We've mentioned him a couple of times this episode. Harris got a 1-year deal, which nowadays seems to be the standard for running backs. That's what Dobbins had, and he's out. So is Najee only going to last 1 year in LAC? We'll find out. And they also added another former Steeler, which we already mentioned, Dante Jackson. And that is to fill the void that Asante Samuel left. So Samuel out, Jackson in. Jackson did really have a pretty good year last year in Pittsburgh after 6 years in Carolina. Had his most interceptions he's ever had in a season. And he can be a leader of this relatively young secondary here in LA. And one more thing to talk about with the Chargers. It was an addition in the offseason, but now it's not an addition because Mike Williams retired. Williams was a Charger from 2017 to 2023. He re-signed this offseason to a 1-year deal. And 2 weeks ago on July 17th, he retired 3 days after he was placed on the PUP list. Williams got traded to the Steelers last year, so I got to see him a couple times in person down at Acrisure. It's kind of shocking. There must be something going on there, injuries or something that hindered Williams' availability and ability to play. So he walks away from the game of football. And you know what? That also helps give Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith a chance to compete here for more reps in camp because one of the veteran guys ahead of them walked away. Now let's get into some stats and talk about our pick for this game. Sure, that's what everyone's been waiting for. We'll start with the quarterback matchup. On LA's side of the ball, Trey Lance and DJ Uiagalelei versus Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker of the Detroit Lions. Trey Lance is expected to play into the third quarter for LA. He's 25 years old and was a former third overall pick, only behind Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. Wow, what a dud class that was. Lance is 2-3 as a starter in the NFL, 2-2 with the 49ers, the team that drafted him. Injuries just kind of riddled his early career, ended up becoming a backup in Dallas. But looking at those injuries, man, 2021, after the injury, Lance had to just take the backseat to Jimmy G once he got healthy. And then in 2022, Lance suffered a season-ending injury in Week 2, which led the 49ers eventually just to discovering Brock Purdy. So I guess that worked out in a sense for the 49ers. You miss on the third overall pick, you hit on Mr. Irrelevant. After Lance steps out of the game, he's going to turn the ball over to DJ Uiagalelei, the undrafted rookie out of Clemson, Oregon State, and Florida State. He was a 2-time ACC champion with Clemson, but Uiagalelei really just didn't live up to the hype, and he injured his hand last year, missed a lot of time down the stretch for Florida State, but did enter the draft ultimately, wasn't picked, and here he is now in LA, chance to compete for a job. Taylor Heineke is the immediate backup to Justin Herbert, so it'll be Lance and Uiagalelei playing for that third spot. Looking at the Detroit side of things, you got Kyle Allen, 7 years in the league, was a Steeler last year like we said, 7-12 as a starter in his career. A lot of those starts were in 2019 when Cam Newton was injured early in the Panthers season. Allen had one pass attempt last year, completed it for 19 yards over the middle to Pat Freiermuth, something slight. I actually just watched that play a minute ago I was at that game, but I didn't remember who he completed the pass to. I didn't know if it was Connor Hayward or Pat Freiermuth or Darnell Washington. I remembered it being a tight end. And the other QB on the Lions roster is Hendon Hooker, who's 27 years old, going into year number 3. The former Offensive Player of the Year in the SEC at Tennessee. Hooker, a third-round pick in 2023, kind of fell in the draft because he was still recovering and working back from a torn ACL. So he actually didn't play at all his rookie season with the Detroit Lions. Last year he got to appear in 3 games in garbage time where he completed 6 of his 9 passes for 62 yards. And Hooker was he was kind of rumored in a lot of trades this offseason for other teams that were maybe QB needy or backup QB needy. Ends up staying here in Detroit and has a chance to play for the QB2 job again behind Jared Goff. Interested to see how that pans out. Looking at the head coaching matchup, Jim Harbaugh and Dan Campbell. Their preseason records, you may ask. Jim Harbaugh is 11-8 as a head coach in the preseason, 1-2 last year with the Chargers. Dan Campbell, career preseason record of 5-7, but both of the last 2 years has gone 2-1. And how about the Chargers and Lions? What are their records as a team in Hall of Fame games? The Chargers Hall of Fame game record is 0-1-1. In 1980, they had a 0-0 tie versus the Packers. We mentioned that midway through the game, there was a storm which caused the rest of the game to be canceled. That was that game against the Packers in 1980, a 0-0 tie. And then in 1994, the lone loss, a 21-17 loss to the Falcons. The Lions Hall of Fame game record, 1-2. The first 2 games, losses to the Redskins and Broncos of 20-3 and 10-7 in 1965 and 1976. And their most recent Hall of Fame game appearance was in 1991, a 14-3 win over the Denver Broncos. Now here's an interesting thought. How have teams that won the Hall of Fame game in prior years ended up faring in their seasons? Well, the last team to win a Hall of Fame game and go on to win a playoff game in the same season was the St. Louis Rams in 2001. My prediction is that will change this year. Whether it's the Lions or Chargers on top tonight, I think that changes this year. Neither team won a playoff game last year, but the Chargers played in a wildcard game, and the Lions had a first-round bye and played in a divisional game. So there's a likely chance that whichever team wins tonight will win a playoff game, ending that almost 25-year-old stretch. Not as crazy, but the home team has won 4 straight, dating back to 2021. The Lions are the home team tonight, and they're also 2-point favorites at the time of recording. The over-under, 32.5. Both teams' traditional starters are out, as well as the Lions' top 2 draft picks, Tyleik Williams and Tate Ratledge. My prediction, I got the Chargers, 16-13. That home team streak is going to end eventually. I think that's this year. And those new Lions coordinators, they won't be perfect right away, especially with backups executing their play calls. This is put up or shut up time for Trey Lance. We get to see tonight if Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman can truly help him grow in what seems to be his last chance in the NFL. So thank you guys for listening to episode 1. Hope you guys stick with me the whole season here on Mr. Thursday Night. And we've got a new segment coming out as well. Mr. Thursday Night will be awarding a weekly player of the game, so stay tuned for that. Who do you think's going to win it this week? Let me know, and I hope to see you guys next week.